We meet again, dummies! It's been more than a year since I've done my Hunt Showdown weapon swap speed study, and it was pretty eye-opening. There were plenty of discrepancies to be found in places I wasn't expecting. And now it's time to expand on it, because I just love staring at my awful Excel sheets. And since we finally gotten back most of all the content we had pre-1896, it's a nice opportunity to tie loose ends. In this video, I'll look at all the new additions Crytek has brought up since the 1896 update, and I'll check the weapons they claimed to have their swap speeds adjusted. After that, I'll dive into yet another old mystery of mine. Do all weapons change their stances at the same speed? Is firing from the hip as fast as going straight into ADS? I'll look into that in the second part of this video. First of all, if you haven't watched the previous video and you want to know more about the weapon swap situation, I advise you to check it out as well. There I explained my methodology and covered the entire arsenal at the time, so there's no reason to repeat that here. All the tests I'll be doing for this video will be performed on the 2.4.0.2 update from the judgment of the full event. Future me here, which is actually past me by the time you hear this, because I was still editing by the time Web of Empress dropped. I actually got the opportunity to retest all the weird stuff on the 2.5 patch. So, as promised, let's start with the new releases. But of course, I can't do that before reminding you that I have a Patreon page in which you can support this channel to your heart's content. Who knows, maybe someday I'll actually do these kind of videos as more than a hobby. But let's get back to reality and see what we found here. In terms of rifles, Hunt 1896 brought a few new additions. The Maynard Sniper and its silencer variant both draw 0.5 seconds and holster in 0.65, putting them in line with most of the regular rifles. Same goes with the Mosin Obres match and its Sharp Eye variant, meaning not even here we can find reasons to pick them up instead of the other big Mosins. The Krag silencer shares the same quirk with the rest of the weapons variants, with its quicker 0.4 seconds draw and 0.62 to holster. Then we have the Infantry 73L in its sniper variant, which... oh, Crytek, okay, I'm sorry for doing this already, but what the hell were you thinking with the renaming of these guns? For those that only played 1896, before the update, you had two big Winfield families, which are basically Winchester in real life, separated mainly by the reserve ammo count, with a list of variants that was the largest out of any gun in the game. It was confusing since they even shared custom ammo types, even if technically they were two distinct weapons, and made little sense to beginners. But right, and the other guns that had Winfield in their names, that was also fun. So Crytek decided to fix this by removing Winfield from all the names, yay, and giving each extremely generic names while adding the third group with even higher ammo capacity and virtually identical otherwise. What were they thinking? I'm just as unable to tell you at a glance which one is now as I was 3 years ago for all it's worth. Anyway, fortunately, both of the infantries perform identical with the rest of what used to be the Winfield group of rifles, and same goes for the new Centennial Pointman in relation to the rest of the Centennial family. I mostly wanted an excuse to complain about the mess regarding the guns' names, okay? You would think that everything's smoothed out and we're out of the woods when it comes to weird statistics. But then you have the 1865 carbine bursting down the door and shouting bonjour because it's regular and silence variant draw at 0.41 seconds, which is 0.10 faster than the aperture variant and the rest of the so-called regular rifles. As a note, the faster guns feel really smooth to draw, but it's quite obvious the animation is not properly aligned. Just in case you're wondering, all the other aperture guns behave perfectly normal, which means absolutely nothing because nobody is gonna use those god-awful sights anyway. Moving on to the new shotguns, the rival Trauma and Maze both are aligned with the other rivals, and the same goes for the Auto 4 Shorty in relation to its bigger brother. And in terms of special weapons, the bomb launcher has similar stats with Big Brother, the crossbow Deadeye with the regular crossbow, while the brand new Chukonu boasts a draw of 0.5 seconds and a draw of 0.66. And last but actually the first new addition of the game after my last video, The throwing spear boasts a light attack of 0.49 seconds, 0.78 for a heavy strike, and a holster speed of 0.65. That means it's slower than the throwing knives and the throwing axes, but we all know that even in its current state it's the strongest tool for PvP. But what has Crytek changed to the existing arsenal? Well, first of all, in the 2.3 update, Crytek boasted that they have fixed the new army and the Scotfield pistols. And you know what? The Madman actually did it! It was great seeing them acknowledge the issue, even if this is the extent of it, which, as you'll see, it's selling it short, ironically. As for what it means for the pistols, all the new army and the Scotfield variants now draw significantly faster than they did before and are now in line with all the other pistols at 0.38 seconds between all of them. The new army still holsters slightly faster, even if the difference is really small and could be put down to the margin of error. The good news doesn't stop here, because the 2.5 patch also addressed the Mako's holster speed. What's even more interesting than that is the way the patch note is worded, because it's not just about the gun simply being in line with the other rifles, but long ammo rifles in particular. Either that's just a less generic term of comparison they chose to use, which is most likely the case, or maybe Crytek hints at making weapon switching be influenced by the caliber, which is as far-fetched as it may sound. I mean, I could pretend I'm pulling the strings at Crytek, but the idea sounds like an unnecessary overcomplication. I didn't recheck every single gun in the game, but I did take a look at all those that were acting strange, just in case. And boy am I glad I did it, because Crytek, my old boy, you've been hiding stuff from us. For instance, the Sparks pistol alongside its newly released silencer variant, plus the LeMat and the Haymaker, all got the same treatment as the new army and Scotfield, and now drawn in about 0.4 seconds as well. I have no idea if they simply forgot to add this to the patch notes, or they accidentally fixed it when performing other changes to the guns, such as when they decreased the Sparks pistol reload speed. But you know what? I'm taking every little victory I can, especially since these adjustments makes the pistol lineup consistent within the margin of error in its entirety. To me, it shows that they're actually serious about ironing everything out, which is tremendous news as far as I'm concerned. In the same list of unannounced changes, we also have a rifle that got a welcome fix, the Nitro Express itself. No longer being on the same level as the Officer Carbine, it's been relegated to being just a normal rifle. Last but not least, I'm happy to report that Fast Fingers has no influence over any stats. It's only awfully animated on most guns and leaves you with fewer bullets overall, because Crytek would never let strange things happen in this game. And that's about it for the changes. For those not keeping track, dual wielding pistols is still broken, the LeMat carbine still holsters slower than the other rifles, the Officer carbines are still two of the fastest rifles to draw and holster, the Krags are still faster to the draw than other rifles, and the shotguns, well, they're just as odd as they ever were. I'm not mentioning this to bash Crytek, but it's best to see where we stand and how much work needs to be done. With this addendum out of the way, time to stare at iron sights and scopes, hoping I'll find some differences so I won't look like a chump studying this. Just like last time, I'll start with the juicy part, and by that I mean methodology, of course. Firstly, I had to determine how ADS works, as funny as that sounds, so we are on the same page over what the hell am I measuring. First of all, while using the Hunter control scheme, your character has three stances. The idle stance, which I have to thank the user Frog from Hunt's Discord server for curing my brain fart and suggesting the name to it, because I had no idea how to name it for some goddamn reason, is the default pose from which you can't shoot your guns. The next one is the hip fire stance, in which the crosshair shows up and allows you to finally fire with a varying degree of accuracy. And of course, last but not least, ADS is the final stance, in which you fire precise shots at the sacrifice of movement speed and visibility of your surroundings. It seems that just like the guns only fire at the end of the the transition between idle stance and hipfire, the same principle is applied at the end of the transitions from either of the two to ADS. That means that yet again I have a reliable point of reference which I can use to measure. And to top it off, the tests are being done on the 2.4.0.2 version of the game, and in another future me intervention, I promise this will be the last, I double check the results on version 2.5, with the frame rate locked at 60 to exclude any variations that could arise from that. Now that I've bored you to death, let's see what I found. Starting with the pistols, one thing becomes clear really fast, which is that there are far fewer discrepancies when it comes to weapon stances compared to swapping. First of all, each stance transition takes an equal amount of time across all weapons groups, with a few exceptions I'll talk about because, of course they are. It's a bit counterintuitive that going straight to the ADS takes just as much time as when going to it from the hipfire stance, but for the sake of gameplay balance and consistency, I can certainly appreciate it. It also means you're free to move as fast as you want before going straight to ADS whenever you're fighting in close quarters with something that isn't a shotgun. The counterintuitivity might trick newer players into believing that if they stay in hipfire they can transition faster to ADS, but as you can see, it's not something that happens in Hunt Showdown. But all pistols having 0.25 seconds for each and every stance transition makes me a bit worried. Was this study a waste of time? Did I really spend hours investigating something that was perfectly fine? Fortunately, the rifles come in to save the day! Yes! For the most part, all of them respect the same 0.25 second transition between all stances, but with some notable exceptions. Specifically, all the Crags have their idle to hipfire transition at 0.16 seconds, noticeably faster than all the other rifles, and it coincides with the findings observed when doing the swap study. Going from idle and hipfire to ADS is perfectly normal on the other hand, meaning in tight quarters you're actually better off going for a quick hipfire than basically any other gun, which is kinda hilarious when you think about it. It's as if the Krag wasn't one of the strongest guns in the game already. The other exception is a bit more amusing because the 1865 carbine's faster hipfire manifests only on the regular and the silenced versions, while the aperture shares the normal stats of the other rifles, just like it happened in the swap study. I even checked if keeping the aperture up and down influences it in any way, but nope, this variant is objectively worse even if you keep it down. It also made me waste my time checking every aperture up and down because they turned out to have absolutely no influence over anything other than handicapping your sight picture or not. Out of what's left from the arsenal, the only other weapon that strays away from the magic 0.25 seconds value is the hunting bow. But here it's understandable, since to fire an arrow you need to pull the string first, which is reflected in all the stance transitions having an extra 0.10 seconds added on top. But beyond that, is it just me, or is the bow behaving a little differently over the past few months? I can't explain it too well, but several times I ended up having an arrow drawn when I didn't want it, or vice versa, thinking I drew one when in fact it didn't in the middle of the game. If there's some bow mains out there that can enlighten me, I'd very much appreciate it, because as someone who likes using it from time to time, it's been bugging me. Actually, you know what, let's draw some conclusions first before delving into the Twilight Zone. For the most part, all weapons switch stances consistently, which is a pleasant surprise after how many quirks there still are with the weapon swapping. Fortunately, the only quicker guns to go into hipfire aren't shotguns. That would have been actually a big problem for the overall gameplay. But from the perspective of a selfish YouTuber, I'm a bit sad I barely had anything to talk about, but at least this aspect of the game is in a really good place nowadays. But there's a few more things I can mention. For example, how scopes work when ADSing. I'm not one that wishes quick scoping becomes the meta or anything like that, but it just looks so bad when zooming in. You've got this ugly opaque texture on the lens that's blocking the sight up until the last frame before firing the round. And it's not even consistent between each scope type. Just look at this with the Musings sniper. You don't even get to see your target. Absolutely atrocious stuff. And you know what? Other sniper scopes don't have this issue, so yet again it's on a gun by gun gun basis. Lebel Marksman is another sad case, and when looking at the Lamette Carbine Marksman, I am not even sure if the crosshair is properly aligned at the moment the bullet is fired either. I have had this feeling with multiple marksman and sniper scopes too. Throughout these tests I try to hit this flagpole, and I'm only partially convinced I missed most shots because I suck using them. When going frame by frame to make these calculations, I saw plenty of shots where the crosshair was right on the flagpole, but the shot missed completely, while the iron sights and dead eyes were much more reliable. Either the visual representation of the scopes is wrong right after zooming in, or there's a delay between looking down a scope and having your aim precise. Another noticeable issue is with the drilling and rivals ADS. Despite both shooting as fast as the others, their animations are slower than with the other guns, and thus you're kind of shooting in the blind. Okay, with the rivals not much of a problem because you'd only use ADS with slugs, and the slugs are not entirely accurate over longer distances anyway, but with the drilling, you're basically forced into staying in ADS a bit longer than normal if you want to get a precise sight picture. I distinctly remember Psycho Ghost calling the drilling a weird gun, and I think this is what he meant besides the unusual bullet velocities it comes packed with. This makes me suspect that what I said earlier about scopes is also a misalignment, but while in the case of scopes I'm not really sure it would be a good thing for the game to be adjusted, the drilling's issue can't be swept under the rug as an intended feature. Really, Crytek, you thought I'd buy this fucking bullshit? Overall, I'm happy with what I found. Hunt always had its quirks, but seeing Crytek slowly whittling them down is a case of cautious optimism. I'm less excited about the state of the game than I was in last June, because as much as I worried that 1896 might break stuff, I did not expect the extent of questionable and inconsistent decisions that would come bundled with. I was not impressed with the slow drip of reintroducing removed content either. I'm not a game designer or a project manager for that matter, but the decision to rush the big update at the cost of a year with missing stuff wouldn't have sat well with me even if it was launched in a good state. This negative tone should not be confused with me not enjoying the game in its current state, because I actually do still, and very much as well. It's just that a few years ago I would have said with very high confidence that Hunt's team has a clear and precise vision over what the game has to be, and one of the few cases where it genuinely felt that the developers were active players with deep understanding of the game they're also working on. The 1896 update, on the other hand, felt as if it was thought out by a different brain entirely, but over the past few months it's as if things are slowly turning back for the better. In the end, I'm only half joking that these study videos are just an excuse for me to talk about Hunt Showdown, because it's still the most damned fun I've had in a shooter in a long time. With that being said, thanks to everyone for watching this video. Don't forget to leave your thoughts, like if your head didn't smash the keyboard as you fell asleep, and share this video with your like-minded fellows. And until next time, cheers!